A big piece to BIM execution plans is agreeing on a scope as well. So let's jump into that. So why is it that we need to agree on a clear BIM scope? So if we were to ask anyone on any given project, every trade manager all the way down to the designers on the team, they will have a different opinion on what their BIM would look like.
And so getting that agreement is a challenge. And we see some of those challenges are due to having unclear responsibilities, who's responsible for certain parts of the scope. Some of it is due to trying to solve those challenges with complex spreadsheets that cause confusion. And we also end up, as a result, from that confusion, misunderstanding, with missing or duplicate scopes. So those challenges are rife within our industry, and they are things that we would like to present some opportunities or tips on how to agree on a clearer BIM scope.
Right, so here's some tips on how to agree on a clear BIM scope. So we first want to start off with some very basic questions. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Why are we doing BIM is the first thing we want to start. Well, then that will lead to scope. What scope would be required, how much is actually needed, what is the scope, when is that scope needed, and who is responsible. And once you've figured all these out, then you'll ask yourself, where do we start?
Where do we start? Yeah.
So one of the first things you want to define in a BIM scope is the why. And usually that is a BIM use, a model purpose, a BIM goal. It could be phases or even milestones on a project. Once you've got that, it's very easy to now go through some sort of scope list or create that. So always thinking of why in mind, it's now a matter of what scope is needed to accomplish those BIM uses. Then we can see how much is actually required. So whether we're defining geometry, whether we're defining information, here we can establish that content throughout each of those BIM uses and start answering the real purpose of why we actually need it. And actually, this really leads into more of a lean scope approach.
Packaging those requirements per model use and making sure that we know precisely, rather than in an abstract way, exactly what's required.
And finally, you want to define who is responsible for that scope. And whether it's on a different milestone, whether it's the type of scope that you've added, you want to define that very clearly. And using a scope grid, you'll actually be able to share when those handovers take place. So in many projects, we have examples where content is owned by a certain trade.
This example is, the stairs are owned by the architect early on, and then the structural engineer takes over. And being able to recap on those, we have to understand why. We always start with the purpose. So why are we creating the model in the first place? Being able to, in a visual, we see a lot of teams really responding to a visual grid of not just the information or the accuracy or the geometry, or it's a combination of all of those so that we define what is required by whom, and then be able to assign them so we can see what the handover is from one team to another. And very importantly, as Louis just mentioned there, making it a lean workflow, making it so that everyone can understand what it is and also be able to deliver on those requirements.